Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Who is praying and who are we praying to? Do we know who we are? And can we know who's praying until we know who we are? Everything is really quite different than what you imagine, because what you imagine is from your mind, and your mind is trapped by desire and by Maya, by karma and by illusion. It doesn't tell us the truth. That which we see through the mind, we see through illusion. So the question for us is, who are we? And what are we trying to accomplish in this world? Well, for starter, we know we're not the world. We know we're not the elements. We know we're not desire. We know we are not Maya. And if you are these things that's praying, then you're not praying. What's praying is the shell that holds you, and the shell that contains the truth of you. And until you know that truth, our prayer is illusion. Our prayer is Maya. Our prayer is what's going on in our head. And what's going on in our head is a very interesting phenomenon. Our head deals with illusion. And Bawa often described it as a store. You want something, your mind gets it for you. You want a god, the mind will give you a cow. You want a god, the mind will give you something to pray to. But it's constantly an exchange of forms. It's an exchange of elemental entities. Somehow we have to escape from this exchange of elements that we are looking to somehow satisfy us. Who is man? What is true man? God created man through a ray that was within himself. This ray was sent into the world and was encapsulated in a soul, which is the body for that ray, but then it was further encapsulated in an elemental creation. Something from the elements were put together, earth, air, fire, water, air, and ether, were put together in a cooperation, and they became the body. And man goes through life with the misinterpretation that he is the body. Man goes through life with the misinformation that there is an I within him, there is an egocentric self within him, and this is somehow separate from the rest of creation. This is somehow separate from all other beings. This is somehow separate from everyone else. It has a separate religion. It has a separate name. It has a separate entity. It has a separate look. It's seen differently. In truth, only when the I disappears, when the egocentric self disappears, is there true man. True man is Allah's creation that came from him, that was encapsulated in the body of the soul, and then in the body that is our elemental body. Only when you are not can we call this man. Everything else is in a progression towards man. So when we are able to leave our attachment to our self, that is when reality begins to enter us. Before that, there is no reality. One of the great early saints, whose name was Bistami, was asked about his state and what changes he had gone through. And he responded, I was lost until I lost the world. While I was in the world, I was lost to the attachments in the world. But when I lost the world, I found the truth. When I lost the world, I found reality. When I lost my attachments, I found reality. So we have to talk to ourselves about who we are. We have to contemplate this. We have to be able, when we are contemplating ourselves, to remove from the midst of us this creation that we see when we look into the mirror. We have to remove from ourselves this creation that we have attached ourselves to and we have formulated as who we are. We have to be able to look outwardly without seeing ourselves. And this means that if you have a mirror, you look into the mirror, you see yourself. But on the back of the mirror, there's a mercury coating. This mercury coating is what creates the mirror. We have to be like the mercury coating, where we don't see ourselves. Now, can we get to that point? Do we have the courage to be without ourselves? Do we have the courage to leave everything that we have learned? Do we have the courage to leave everything that we've been told? Do we have the courage to leave our religion, to leave all the ideas of every religion? Do we have the idea, do we have the courage to be the same as everybody else, to be in a state of unity with all of creation? Or do we constantly revert back to that which we've been taught as children, to that which we've been taught throughout our life as reality, and accept that reality, even though the wise ones tell us that that isn't real? So as we walk through our life, we try and contemplate what it is that could alter our existence, make it better, make it more real. And so what do? We regret things that we've done. And we believe, oh God, if I could only change that in my life, if what happened 32 and a half years ago, I would have done something different, everything would be different now. No, it wouldn't. Because all of these things that we did are irrelevant. The relevant part is, can we lose ourselves? Everything that we think that we did in the world is another attachment we just think went wrong. And we're playing with Maya. We're playing with illusion. We're playing with regret. We're playing with guilt. We're playing with things that are the consequences of our interaction with illusion. And as long as we play with the consequences of our interaction with desire and illusion, we make no progress. We stay in the same place. It just has a different look. It has a different scenario. We need to leave all the scenarios. We need to leave the world. The Sufis, when they say to die before death, mean to lose the attachment to the world and to the self. When death occurs, we lose our religion, we lose our friends, we lose everything that we've done. The only thing that will stay with us were the positive things that we did in our life, but everything else is gone. Everything else disappears, dissipates, is no longer of consequence. Can we enter into that state now? If we really want to pray, what has to be done? What do we have to do? Because the mind perceives the mind. Desire perceives desire. Earth perceives earth, water perceives water, air perceives air, ether perceives ether. What perceives reality? What understands reality? What breaks through Maya and illusion and desire and enters into truth? There is a ray that is a light that is from Allah, that is within each of us, and that through wisdom sees reality. The soul is the body for that light, which is wisdom, and that light can see truth. That light can see reality. We are of that light, and it is only when we reach states of wisdom that we become aware of truth. In the time before that, we are playing mind games. The perception of God's light is prayer. The perception of God's light is the only prayer. Now, there are prayers that people do in various religions. There are formal prayers. There are formal rituals. But do any of these prayers, any of these rituals have any meaning if they are merely repetitions of words without a loss of self, without a loss of identity and emerging with reality? So if we are intending to do true prayer, if we are intending to make ourselves surrender to truth, if we are tending to follow the intention that was made for us, we have to give up the attachment to ourself and to the attachment to everything that we hold on to that's part of the worldly creation, that's part of the worldly understanding of things, that's part of the worldly acts of separation. If we hold on to anything that separates us from other men, we hold on to an illusion. If we hold on to anything that classifies different people as good and bad, or indifferent. We are holding on to illusion. There is a unity in existence. There is a oneness in existence. When we learn to understand that one, only then can true prayer occur. So we have to give up everything but the acknowledgement of Allah. We have to give up everything but understanding that God alone is real. We have to give up all of the ideas that we have in the world that we think move us forward in the world. We have to stop looking at form and the ideas that come from form as reality. Ritual all has form, and we hide in ritual when we become afraid. When we become afraid that we've lost our connection to God, we hide in ritual. We hide in repetition. We hide in scriptures. We hide in reading scriptures. But what can reading scriptures do for us? What we need to do is somehow get in touch with reality. And the only reality is God. As long as there is a mind, we will not know the truth. As long as we adhere to what the mind tells us, we will not know the truth. Meditation is sitting still and looking at yourself. You have to go beyond looking at yourself. You have to go beyond trying to find out about yourself within this life of form. You have to find out about yourself within the world of wisdom. You have to find out about yourself within the light ray that was sent into you. And you have to be willing to give up of yourself for that. Arrogance is the major obstacle between yourself and truth, because arrogance believes you exist. There was a sultan who was going hunting with some of his men. And he was at a full gallop, and the animal he was chasing got lost in the woods, and he was exhausted, and he was sweating like crazy. And finally, he came upon a small shack, and he stopped and got off the shack, and there was a young boy there in torn clothes, and he asked him for water. And the boy said to him, "My father just went to get fresh water, but we can certainly give you a spot to rest." So he walked his horse and he walked him around a little bit, and then he sat him down under a tree to rest. And after a few minutes, when the sweating had stopped a bit, the boy said to him, "I'm going to go in the house and I'll bring you out some water." And when he came out with the water, the Sultan said, "You just told me your father went to get water." And he said, "I had to say that to you because you were in such a sweat and you were in such a state that if I gave you water before you had a chance to rest and calm down and your body got composed, you would have gotten ill from the water. So now I can give you water, but I did not lie to you. My father is going to get more water. As a matter of fact, here he comes." And the Sultan was very taken by this boy's intelligence and the fact that he understood that in the state that he was in, he couldn't have water, and he delayed him. So when the father came back And they began to talk, and he told everybody who he was, and his men caught up to him. He said, I'm going to take this boy with me to the palace, and I'm going to consider him my own, and I'm going to have him educated and trained, because obviously he has great insight already, and with the proper training, he can be a great assist to this country. And the father said, for my sultan, I would give my life, so I'll certainly give my son. So they took the boy, and he had the boy in the palace. And he treated the boy with a lot of love, a lot of compassion, and he treated him very specially. The other ministers in the palace all became jealous, and they were beginning to grumble about the special treatment that this boy was getting. And this boy was given full access to everything. He had keys to the entire palace, including the treasury. So rumors started to spread that he was stealing from the Sultan, that he was taking things for himself. And they kept complaining to the Sultan. And this really hurt the Sultan, but he wanted to end it. So one day when the boy was out, he said to the other people who were grumbling about the boy, do what you want, see what you think. And so they broke into his room and they tore the room upside down, and they couldn't find anything. So they began to dig into the room, and they couldn't find anything. And afterwards, he came back. When they came back to the Sultan said, well, what did you find? And he said, well, truthfully, we didn't find anything except a shepherd's staff, a pair of sandals, and a cloak that a shepherd wears. And that was all we found. And when the boy came back and he saw his room all disheveled and torn up, and he saw the Sultan explained what happened. And he said, I had to let them break in, because if I didn't, there would have never been an end to it. And the boy said, well, the king is certainly able to test his servant, and I have no objection to that. And the Sultan asked him, they said, all they found was a shepherd's staff, a pair of sandals, and a cloak that a shepherd wears. How come you have these things with you? And the little boy said, to remind me of what I was and what you've made me, and that all that I've become is because of your indulgence, because of your mercy, because of your compassion, and because of your gift. And that's our status. Everything that we have is because of God's indulgence towards us, of God's mercy towards us, of God's compassion towards us. And if we lose that understanding, if we lose the understanding that everything that we are, everything that we have, everything that we know is because Allah has allowed it to happen, we begin to become arrogant. But as long as we maintain that understanding and that demeanor, then we can go in the right direction. But some of the major things that we have to realize are everything that our mind thinks is false. Everything that desire tells us is false. All form is false. We are presently in a situation where we have a body made up of the elements: earth, air, fire, water, air, and ether. These have a cooperation to maintain this body. But over time, this cooperation breaks apart, and then water goes and takes what is its, what belongs to it. Earth takes what belongs to earth. Air takes what belongs to air, and so forth. And the body falls apart. This is a truth that we cannot deny. We can look in other directions and make believe it isn't so, but we cannot deny it. So since we know this body disappears, since we know this body is a temporary manifestation that is only made to hold together for a certain period of time, who are we? Well, we're certainly not this body. And when we begin to truly understand that and stop trying to build this self up and make it greater and greater and greater and more important and more important and more important, as if that was somehow going to help us and save us and take us to the truth, when we stop doing that, we can begin to look for reality. Mind and desire cannot find reality. They deal with form. Everything that deals with form brings us to conclusions that are not true. So somehow we have to begin to deal with light. Somehow we have to begin to deal with truth. And this happens through incorporating wisdom into our being. And how does wisdom rise in our being? Where does wisdom come from? Well, there is a transformation that has to go on within us. A saltwater fish has to live in salt water. A freshwater fish has to live in fresh water. You can't take a freshwater fish and put it into the saltwater ocean, in the same way that you can't put a saltwater fish and put it into a lake of fresh water. Now, we, each of us, are in the process of a transformation from believing in this world to not believing in this world, a transformation from accepting what we see as real to a transformation of denying the reality of what we see. This is a difficult transformation for us to make. It's traumatic. People lose their senses sometimes as they go through this. So what do we need? We need a teacher who can slowly take us through that transformation, take us through this world of belief in the world to the world of disbelief in this world, to take us towards reality. And this is a process. And this process doesn't happen in a day. It happens slowly. So we do rituals, we do prayers, we do fasting, we do all kinds of worldly elemental things as we progress beyond worldly elemental things. So we go through the 5 times prayer until we go beyond the 5 times prayer. We go through fasting until everything that we need to fast from, we are no longer attached to. Food is the smallest part of fasting. Arrogance, ego, desire are all things we have to fast from. So there is this progression to go from the elemental to the light form, to the light that is our soul, encased within our soul. This is reality. So to enter from illusion to reality is like going from salt water into fresh water. You can't do it in an instant. You have to be taken slowly, 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 and you have to be shown the non-reality of everything else. And what happens in the world is when this kind of knowledge is brought into the world by ketubs who see things from the light source, from the light world, the world reacts to them in a violent way because the trauma that it causes isn't bearable by a lot of humanity, especially the people who are in charge and who are trying to control society. So this kind of language, these kinds of words, these kinds of statements become heretical. And heretical means outside of the bounds of religion. And what happens next? Penalties are imposed for going outside of the bounds of religion. And what are these penalties? These penalties deal with death. They deal with destroying that which annihilates the form. They deal with destroying that which calls the form for what it is, illusion. You can't call the world that people hold power over illusion, because the powerful become very angry about that, and they have to destroy that which denies their power. And that's the danger of Sufism. It denies the power in the world. It denies the power of everything in the world. And it tells you that the only reality is God. There is no king in the world. There is no sultan in the world. There is nobody you need to pay obeisance to in the world except God. And the truly enlightened ones know that. And that's what enlightenment is, to pass beyond the world. Why do so many religious denominations have people within them who leave the world, who leave it entirely? Because in each religion, men have concluded that there is no reality in staying in the world. And in order to find truth, they have to separate themselves from everything that keeps them attached to the world. So some people go sit in caves. Some people go sit in monasteries. Some people go sit in jungles. Some people do lots of interesting things to pull themselves away from the world. We have chosen a path that stays within the world, yet is not of the world. We have chosen a path where within the world, we live outside of it. We live beyond the world, because the world is not our home. The world is a transitory place to take us into the trajectory of the next existence. And the next existence is where our soul goes forth to find its true home. And what is the true home for our soul? It's with God. So when we begin to understand that we are not real, only our soul is real, when we begin to understand that only through wisdom can we understand our soul, that's when we begin to truly become alive. And what is it that wisdom explains? What is it that wisdom knows that the intellect doesn't know? Wisdom knows that the form is not real. Intellect can't perceive that. Wisdom knows that this body is a temporary manifestation. The intellect can never perceive that. Wisdom knows that we do not exist, only God exists. The intellect can never perceive that. So the intellect performs all of these rituals to hide in because we're afraid of death, because we think we have to do things on behalf of our Lord. And what our Lord wants is for us to disappear in him, not to do things on his behalf. He doesn't need anything from us. He is incomparable in his oneness. He is incomparable in his mercy and his compassion and his ability to overwhelm everything. The world is smaller than the head of a pin, but wisdom is so large that it cannot be engulfed. So somehow we have to go to that place where we begin over again. We begin over again in understanding that everything we've been taught has come to us through explanations of form and dealing with form. And we do have to deal with form. We have to deal with assisting other human lives. We have to deal with an enormous number of things like right and wrong, permissible and non-permissible within the form. But we have to be able to go beyond the form. And it's only when we go beyond the form that true prayer begins. When I disappear, then I can truly pray, because when I disappear, I don't see myself in the act of prayer. I only see my Lord. So that is our intention. That is what we are trying to do. We have to soundly believe, truly believe, there is only one God. And that God is the only thing that is real, and that we came from him and that we return to him. The repetition of La ilaha illallah can go on 43,200 times a day, which are the number of breaths we take in a day. That's what's available to us. That many opportunities are given to us each day to recount reality, to maintain reality, to reiterate reality, to bring reality into our own existence over and over and over. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. I do not exist. Only God exists. This is our zikr. This is our mantra. This is our truth. This is reality. And when we touch that reality, we become real. May each of us become real. May that truth enter into each of our hearts. May we all come to know the light within us and the soul within us, and may we understand that reality. And then the mysteries of the universe will open up to us. But until we know that, we don't know anything. There's nothing that we can know in this world, because all truth is beyond this world. May we come to know the truth. Ameen, ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.